बरतानिया पर तवील तरीन अरसे तक हुक्मरानी करने वाली मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम का जनाजा कल वेस्टमिंस्टर एबी में होगा, जिसके साथ ही ऑपरेशन लंदन ब्रिज और 10 रोजा कौमी सोग अपने इख्तिताम को पहुंचेगा। मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम का इंतकाल 8 सितंबर को हुआ था, जिसके बाद उनकी मैयत की मुंतकली, जनाजे और कौमी सोग के लिए पहले से तयशुदा मंसूबा लंदन ब्रिज एक्सरसाइज ऑपरेशन हो गया था, जिसमें मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम की वफात के बाद के तमाम प्रोसीजर्स की तफसीलात तय कर दी गई थी। एक अंदाजे के मुताबिक मलका के जनाजे पर 90 लाख पाउंड खर्चा होगा। कहा जा रहा है कि मलका के जनाजे में इतना बड़ा इज्तिमा होगा जिसकी मिसाल गुज़िश्ता कई अशरों में दिखाई नहीं देती। मलका के जनाजे में मुख्तलिफ ममालिक के सरबराहान समेत सैकड़ों अहम शख्सियात शरीक होंगे। अमरीकी सदर जो बाइडन, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, न्यूजीलैंड और कनाडा के वज़ीर आज़म के अलावा कॉमनवेल्थ ममालिक के कई सरबराहान भी मलका की आखिरी रसूमात में शरीक होंगे। वज़ीर आज़म पाकिस्तान शहबाज शरीफ भी मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम के जनाजे में शिरकत के लिए लंदन में मौजूद हैं। इसके अलावा हज़ारों अफराद मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम को अलविदा कहने के लिए सड़कों पर हैं, जिसके लिए कई मील तक कतारें मौजूद हैं। जबकि कल दुनिया भर में करोड़ों लोग इस जनाजे को टेलीविजन और इंटरनेट पर बराह रास्त देखेंगे। कल रात शहजादा विलियम और शहजादा हैरी समेत मलका के दीगर पोते पोतियों और नवासियों ने मलका के ताबूत के पास खड़े होकर उन्हें खराज अकीदत पेश किया। मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम का दौरे हुक्मरानी 70 साल तवील था। इनकी मीरास एक मजबूत खातून के तौर पर सामने आई। उनके इंतकाल से बरतानवी अवाम के लिए एक अहद का इख्तिताम हुआ है, जिसके बाद उनके बेटे किंग चार्ल्स सोम बादशाह बन गए हैं। और अब देखना होगा कि किंग चार्ल्स के दौर में बरतानिया में बादशाहत का मुस्तकबिल क्या होगा। मलका एलिजाबेथ दोयम की आखिरी रसूमात और उनकी लेगेसी पर बात करने के लिए आज हमारे साथ बहुत खास मेहमान मौजूद हैं। हमें स्टूडियो में ज्वाइन किया है बरतानवी हाई कमिश्नर क्रिश्चियन टर्नर ने। मिस्टर टर्नर, थैंक यू फॉर जॉइनिंग अस।
My pleasure to be with you, Shazad.
So, Mr. Turner, it is going to be a big day tomorrow. Queen Elizabeth II died on 8th September, and the mourning and the procession that followed her death will end tomorrow after her funeral. And I've been going through the list. Many world leaders, dignitaries, they will be attending the funeral. Thousands will be on the street, millions will be watching on TV. How big is this event going to be, and what does it mean to the people across the world, and especially to the people of UK?
Well, Shazad, it's one of the biggest, I think, moments in the modern history of our country. Of course, Her late Majesty the Queen, she lived for 96 years, 70 of those on the throne, the second longest reigning monarch in history. We think the funeral tomorrow is probably going to be the largest televised event in history. For us, it's like organising over 200 state visits at the same time with all the world dignitaries that are flying in for it. And it'll mark the end of 10 days of national mourning, where Britain really has stopped and has focused on nothing else but paying its respects to the late Queen.
And obviously her reign was during the time where the world was changing very drastically, UK drastically, and she had to adapt to it, and she did very well. She changed the image of the royal family. She was she had more public and TV appearances as well. So how do you see her legacy of the 70-year reign?
Well, I think there's two things, Shazad. I mean, it's extraordinary that actually she never gave a TV interview, which for a journalist like you might seem amazing, although she was a huge public figure and across the world we knew her. Of course,
but she had TV appearances.
She had appearances, but she never gave an interview, and I think that's the secret to the first thing, which is, as you say, her constancy in a time of change. She came to the throne in 1952. Britain still had an empire. It was just after the Second World War. And in that period, think how much the world has changed. The empire is gone. She led the way through the Commonwealth to a very different modern world, to really a community of nations. We describe her as our best diplomat. She traveled all over the world, but she was a constant when everything else was changing. The internet, social media, different social attitudes, modern Britain, a much more cosmopolitan and diverse place. So I think that was the first part of her big legacy, was her continuity. There is a second thing as well, if I may, which is about the values she represented. And hers was a life of duty and of service to others. And in all of the issues we faced, she emphasized coming together, respecting one another, and listening to differences. And I think it was a big part of her power and of her strength as a leader of the country.
And as a constitutional monarch, I guess there was a balance in her position. If I ask you who was her favorite prime minister, and perhaps there were 15 of them, we don't know who was her favorite prime minister or who wasn't.
She never revealed it, and she never revealed her views on the big political issues of the day, whether that's Brexit, anything else, she had to be very, very careful. She was, if you like, above politics.
Yeah.
And as such, she could lead the people through all of that change.
Had no role in policy making or
No.
stuff like that, as you said, Brexit and
None
all.
at all.
Yeah. And you had interactions with her. How was that experience?
So I did as her official representative here in Pakistan, and of course previously in my other ambassadorial jobs, I was High Commissioner in Kenya. I had the honour to meet her, to interact with her, and you know we're supposed to never reveal the intricacies of our meetings with her, but I'm sure it's no secret to share. She was wonderfully well informed, an incredibly hard-working public servant, and quite a keen sense of humour. As is well recorded, you remember at the London Olympics when she had that sketch with James Bond, she wasn't above being able to laugh at herself and her own position.
Yeah.
So a remarkable leader, and I think it's why at this time it's a tough time for both countries, for Pakistan, for the UK, as we mourn her loss, as you respond to the floods. I think it's why we're feeling that quite a profound sense of grief as a country.
And I was just going through her messages. One of her last messages was about Pakistan and the floods and the destruction and the tragic loss of life that is caused by the floods. And she says in her statement to the President of Pakistan that I'm deeply saddened to hear of the tragic loss of life and destruction caused by the floods. Her thoughts are with those people who are affected in the floods.
Yes, it's a lovely thing, isn't it? I mean, of course, she visited Pakistan twice officially.
Once in the 60s and last time was 1997.
That's right,
Yeah.
61 and 97, both quite big visits, major moments.
Yeah.
I have many people who come up to me and remember talking to her and meeting her at those. And one of her very last official messages is that one you read out, where she was moved by the floods, concerned about the impact on the people of Pakistan, and wrote in solidarity to His Excellent Presidency, President Alvi, to express her message of concern. And only days later, sadly, she passed away.
And what were her views about Pakistan? Because when she visited Pakistan, Pakistan was already a former colony. It was a part of Commonwealth states. So what were her views about Pakistan?
Well, I think, because she was above politics,
Yeah.
she wouldn't have commented on international affairs in that sense. But it's very clear she had a deep affection for the country. Those sorts of ties, you know that I always say, hum ek saath hain.
Yeah.
You know, we are very closely bound together, and she recognized that. She knew that we have 2% of our population are British Pakistani. Of course, her son, now King Charles III, he most recently visited in 2006. He also wrote a message to the country after the floods, and expressed his solidarity and made a personal donation to the floods appeal. And then, of course, as most viewers will know, we had a visit from the now Prince of Wales. William and Kate came and visited in 2019. So it shows over time those strong links between the two countries are really as solid as ever.
And what kind of messages have you received from the leaders in Pakistan? How have they reacted to the sad demise of Queen?
Well, I've been very humbled, Shahzad. On the first day of official mourning, I was able to receive at my residence to sign the Book of Condolences the President, the Prime Minister, the Chief of Army Staff, the Foreign Minister. We've had representatives from right across the political spectrum, Parliament, business leaders, faith leaders, all of whom have come, and they've written quite personal messages in the condolence book about what Her Majesty meant to them. I think, as you pointed out, it's a very different world to the one that she came to as Queen in 1952, a very different world than the one she visited in 1961. She was only, 34, 35 then, years of age. So it's a recognition that we're now two countries of equals, we're partners, it's a modern partnership, but I think people recognize that remarkable life of service and duty that she
I was
represented.
recently speaking to Inzamam ul Haq, former Pakistan Test cricket captain, and this was on air, and he met Queen in 1997, and they all had to say very good things about her. So it's an end of an era, a new era starts, King Charles III has taken over, and the transition is very smooth. Everything after London Bridge operation, it's very smooth, and probably you can shed some light on that as well. So the transition so far has been smooth, but how do you see the progression of constitutional monarchy in the changing times?
Well, you're right, this London Bridge exercise, that was our code word for the death of the monarch, and it's been in preparation and practicing for many, many years. Ambassadors like me, we have the preparations ready to go, and of course, sadly, we had to finally do that. the 10 days of official mourning is actually a very long period. You may have seen pictures.
Everything is decided from step by step, how the news is going to be relayed.
Down to the tiniest detail, the movement of her coffin, where she lies in state, and these extraordinary crowds. People are queuing for 24 hours overnight in the cold and rain to see her. Just yesterday, one of our most famous footballers, David Beckham, stood in the queue for that length of time to pay his respects. My parents went. I mean, I would have gone if I had been there. There's a real sense of the country coming together. King Charles III, as he is now known, he immediately has ascended to the throne. His coronation will be probably
somewhere next year.
Somewhere
spring
next year, I think,
2022,
a due period of time after the funeral, and time to prepare for that will also be a very big event. And his monarchy, as hers, it will be different. It will evolve and change and adapt to the modern times, but I think he has shown he is a man of also deep compassion, of hard work, and who cares about the issues like climate change, as Pakistan knows better than most, that the world is facing.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kristen Turner, for being on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.